Naturally, everyone would be inclined to wonder about and question the overall plan for a new DC cinematic universe. The types of stories that are going to be told, the different genres that will be explored, is there an overarching narrative that's building to something akin to what the MCU did with the Infinity Saga? How will the rest of DC's tentpole characters be introduced after the success of Superman? All that good stuff. DC Studios is in a unique position because this would be the second attempt at an interconnected universe that will be fleshed out across different live action and animated TV shows and films. Even though we're barely 2 years into the DCU, you're already seeing the roller coaster of switch-ups from people based on what we know or what has been released so far. There are fair criticisms to be had about how specific projects have been structured, but there's also all this doom and gloom that's been taken to such a dramatic extent. Niggas swore on their mama that the DCU was done for based on the critical and financial reception of one movie focused on a non-heavy hitter. And now people are changing their tune again, with Lanterns receiving critical acclaim and having one of the biggest debuts in HBO Max history.
Now that's how you supposed to shoot. From now on, that's how you shoot!
Clayface is probably going to be a solid horror flick, and the gun still has bullets left to shoot for Man of Tomorrow. If that movie ends up flopping, wallahi I'm making an OnlyFans account. Go ahead and clip this. But if they can maintain consistency in producing projects that are well received, what better way to elevate that momentum than to shed light on another member of the Trinity within the next couple of years? I doubt they'd want to release the DCU Batman film close to the slated release date for the Batman Part 2, and if that's the case, I don't think anyone would complain if Wonder Woman were to be the next major pillar brought to the forefront. I do find it interesting that there wasn't a Wonder Woman movie as part of the initial slate announced back in 2023. One guess could be that they wanted to create enough separation between the DCEU and this new version they were working on. But in that same vein, the Gods and Monsters slate included an announcement of a new Batman, which was less than a year after the release of The Batman by Matt Reeves, and the Flash movie released the same year as the initial announcement, featuring two different versions of the character. Not to mention, this was also a few months after Henry Cavill's cameo in the mid-credits scene of Black Adam. Eventually, we would find out that there is in fact a Wonder Woman movie in development, with James Gunn confirming this in an interview with Entertainment Weekly about a month prior to Superman's release. Since then, we haven't really learned anything about what the film will entail. I couldn't tell you when the movie takes place, what its central premise is, the main villain, or how far along they are in the scriptwriting process. All we know is that it's in the works and that the writer of Supergirl has been tasked with writing the script.
That's it?
So far, Wonder Woman has been the least talked about member of the Trinity when it comes to her role in the DCU. We at least have a general idea of where they're headed with the world's finest. Batman's more fantastical villains are being explored or are even getting their own projects like Clayface. The Brave and the Bold is set to introduce audiences to the Bat family. Superman's supporting characters like Jimmy Olsen and Supergirl have their own dedicated projects that have already been released or are upcoming. In universe, the Daily Planet crew is producing an 8-part docu-series looking back at the People vs. Gorilla Grodd trial, where Grodd was convicted of killing his father. Jimmy Olsen is directing and was given the chance to interview Grodd to get more insight on his side of the story. Superman himself has appeared in multiple DCU projects by this point. Both he and Batman have already been established as having operated in the universe for some amount of time, whereas with Wonder Woman, it's more ambiguous as to whether she had even made her public debut as a superhero by the time the first season of Peacemaker takes place in the timeline.
Have you met Wonder Woman?
I've never met her, but she did spend an entire party IFing me from across the room.
Wonder Woman and Flash are mentioned in here by the kids.
Are they canon? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. They'll exist eventually. Whether they exist now, I don't know.
Paradise Lost was going to be an avenue for exploring some of Wonder Woman's wider mythology and supporting cast. A prequel series focused on the Amazons of Themyscira before Diana's birth, pitched as a Game of Thrones style drama. But it looks like that show won't be coming out anytime soon, if at all, since it's no longer a priority for HBO. There's also the fact that HBO turned down pitches for separate Catwoman and Poison Ivy spin-off shows, alongside Waller and Paradise Lost being put on the back burner. Now, I don't know if this is a byproduct of Supergirl's reception discouraging executives from moving forward with projects centered on female characters, coupled with the last handful of female-led comic book movies not performing that well in theaters, whether it be entries like Birds of Prey, The Marvels, or Madam Web, to name a few. Which is why a successful Wonder Woman movie is even more crucial. She's the only superheroine with enough star power to consistently carry her own franchise in today's climate.
It's gotta be me. It's like, I was made for this.
It's a shame that she has a track record of TV shows about her or her mythology being put on the back burner or outright cancelled. There were multiple pitches to Fox Kids to make an animated series in the 90s, but they were rejected each and every time. There was supposed to be a live-action Wonder Woman show on NBC in 2011, but it wasn't picked up by the network due to the poor reception of the pilot episode. The CW planned on developing a Wonder Woman prequel series in 2012 called Amazon that would focus on Diana's origins, essentially serving as her equivalent to Smallville or Gotham, but the idea never materialized. The Arrowverse also canceled a series centered on Yara Flor Wonder Girl, and these aren't even all the times a Wonder Woman related show had been canned, just some of the more prominent examples. The main concern surrounding the DCU Wonder Woman is the current writer of her solo movie. Supergirl didn't really resonate with critics and audiences, and ended up being one of, if not the biggest flop in DC film history. There are multiple factors that went into its underperformance, with poor test screenings during the post-production stage, misinterpreting specific moments from the source material, questionable director choices. Some have argued that the screenwriter might have a better shot with an original story that takes tidbits from other story arcs, rather than crafting a direct adaptation of a specific story. But even if the script itself was deemed good enough for the movie to get greenlit as quickly as it did, or was better than what was shown on screen, I just can't see how elements of the script were considered so good that it justified giving her the keys to Wonder Woman and Teen Titans. One of the objectives of the DCU is to hire the right creative talent, since James Gunn wants to give the people behind these projects the ability to bring their own voices to the stories they're crafting, reflecting the variety of tones and genres found across the DC Comics library. The creative team behind Lanterns talked about how Gunn had more of a hands-off approach when it came to the show's development. Obviously, he'd be involved to some extent, but he wasn't micromanaging the project. Tom King essentially pitched the show as True Detective meets Green Lanterns when Gunn was putting together the DCU writers' room to map out the slate of stories. Tom King was given the ability to choose which project he wanted to tackle, inevitably picking the show he pitched in the first place.
When James Gunn first sort of got the call to do it, he assembled sort of this little writers' room, and Green Lanterns came on the table, and I think I threw out something as simple as like, we just should do like True Detective Green Lantern, Training Day Green Lantern. It got put on a board, and along with 1,000 other ideas. James like, which one do you want to work on? And I'm looking at it, I was like, yeah, that's the one. Put me on that. That's going to be something special. That's going to be something cool.
Could you imagine an alternate timeline where Tom King decided to work on the Wonder Woman movie instead of Lanterns and Mr. Miracle, incorporating tidbits he would go on to use for his Wonder Woman run when it comes to her characterization?
He was whipping up shit in a kettle, boiling shit.
Actual shit?
Like... He was boiling poo in a kettle. Bro, the smell. Mike, the smell.
He was boiling shit
in a kettle, bro.
Listen, King as a DC Comics writer has written some good stuff, he's written some not so good stuff, and his run on Wonder Woman might be some of the worst of his not so good stuff, I'm not gonna lie. But I do bring forth some encouraging news, because even though he's involved in the overall creative vision and writer's room for the universe, Tom King has no involvement whatsoever in the development of the upcoming Wonder Woman movie. Wonder Woman 1984 was a byproduct of giving Patty Jenkins the freedom to do whatever she wanted with the story after the success of the first film, so it's crucial to prevent a situation like that from ever happening by picking the right storytellers. I don't know if Ana Nogueira's duties are just relegated to being the screenwriter, or if she is also creating the story and deciding the key details about, say, Diana's origin, her power set, and who among her supporting cast will be established in the DCU, essentially being the architect behind this new version, because if that's the case, I gotta be honest, I don't think that's a good idea. At the time of recording, there has yet to be a live-action DCU film slated for 2028. So far, all we've got confirmed from DC Studios is The Batman Part 2, which is an Elseworlds film, and Dynamic Duo at the end of June, another Elseworlds movie. There's been some speculation that the movie featuring Bane and Deathstroke could potentially be released that year, considering it has progressed to the point of having a list of potential frontrunners to direct it. Now, I'm no studio executive, but I would personally push for a late 2028 release for a Wonder Woman feature film if it's on track to get greenlit in a timely manner. It would align well with introducing another member of the Trinity within a few years after the release of Superman. Obviously, this doesn't mean rush out the film to meet that release window if it's not ready to do so. I'd rather wait a few years for a great Wonder Woman film than get a half-baked subpar entry. But I'm also not trying to wait until 2030 just to see Diana on the big screen again. The notion of wanting The Brave and the Bold to drop prior to 2030 should most definitely apply to Wonder Woman as well. The Brave and the Bold is another potential option if the script is complete and the film is on track for a green light. But even if that were the case, which I think is incredibly unlikely, I don't think it would be wise to release 2 live-action theatrical Batman movies in the same year.
I guess my question is, like, timeline-wise, like, how does this work? Like, is there... I presume you wouldn't want to release Brave and Bold and the Batman 2 in the same calendar year. It like starts to get a little confusing, or no, you tell me. I mean, having 2 Batmen running around at the same time.
Probably not. But yeah, probably not. No.
Okay.
Probably not the same calendar year. Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, the next live-action theatrical DC Studios film after Man of Tomorrow that isn't set in its own universe should include a full appearance by one of these two. I feel like Wonder Woman has yet to have her own definitive theatrical adaptation that serves as a love letter to the character, an accurate portrayal that embraces her comic roots and gives audiences a new appreciation for what she's all about. From how Wonder Woman should be characterized to the visual aesthetic of the film itself. I mean, Gunn himself has acknowledged how conceptualizing a DCU Wonder Woman story would be easier than Batman, considering there aren't as many versions of the character across media. While the 2017 movie was a critical and commercial success, I wouldn't call the DCEU's version a definitive take or the gold standard for how Diana should be depicted on screen, particularly when it comes to how elements of her comic book roots were translated. Zeus and the rest of the Greek gods died in an attempt to stop Ares long before the movie's events. Any sense of seeing Diana's worship or relationship with the Greek goddesses was completely destroyed. We got piss-poor adaptations of two of Wonder Woman's most iconic villains. Her powers and abilities are inconsistent across the different films. The Amazons themselves aren't fleshed out as characters, and the significance of sisterhood through Diana forming friendships with other prominent female characters outside Themyscira isn't really explored. She's also never portrayed as a diplomat or ambassador for Themyscira throughout the DCEU. I'm not saying all of these elements had to be present in the first movie. Some could have been incorporated by her second film or later, but many were never planned to be a part of this iteration to begin with, such as having the gods killed before Diana's birth. Meanwhile, Batman and Superman fans are chilling with their most recent films because they turned out to be
finger licking good special. That's what I'm talking about.
When it comes to writing any new interpretation that's meant to basically serve as the new mainstream version and have continued stories for the next decade plus, there are certain things you just can't skip or gloss over. Diana's diplomatic efforts as an ambassador for Themyscira would be vital to the ongoing battle for power between metahumans, corporations, and governments, as well as to easing tensions surrounding Themyscira's existence and what the general public knows about the island. It's to a point where they have an entire college course centered on what's public knowledge.
This is a class on Themyscira, right, gorgeous? You should be able to tell me something about it.
I guess the ancient sculptures of Antigone.
It'd be important for Wonder Woman to use her public status to clarify her intentions as a hero or as an Amazon in the present day, considering Cersei in this universe is a rogue Amazon herself who wanted to rule the island, and is a known metahuman criminal. She should actively try to get involved in world affairs, rather than walking away from mankind and choosing not to use her abilities to help others for decades simply because a loved one died, or because she learned about the horrors of war. Being a supposed major pillar of the world building, it poses the question of how would Wonder Woman feel about the government trying to send metahuman prisoners to a planet they can never return from, and forcing them to fend for themselves in an incredibly dangerous setting, to the point where the utilization of salvation might seem inhumane to some.
We're talking just metahumans, right?
Most likely. I haven't outlined all the parameters. I'm still dealing with it from a legal standpoint.
It's been firmly cemented that she isn't fond of cruel methods and leads with compassion and empathy, even toward her enemies if they're willing to accept such kindness. She's not a bloodthirsty, heartless warrior. Despite the misconceptions surrounding her morals, it should be a known fact that she is only willing to kill if there's absolutely no other way. I also think it's important to show the key differences in how Wonder Woman interacts with different costumed crime fighters, and how her warm, maternal-like demeanor shapes her relationships with her colleagues, when compared to other heroes like Superman or Batman. The importance of sisterhood in Wonder Woman comics is foundational to her identity, and her upbringing is emblematic of how strength and compassion don't have to act as polar opposites. A grand sense of femininity, empathy, and emotional openness don't have to be diminished in order to be strong, which could be more thematically resonant with young girls and audiences than what was shown in the Supergirl movie if executed correctly. Her long-lasting role would be the perfect avenue for showcasing her connections and team-ups with other female superheroes, helping to elevate lesser-known characters. One thing that intrigues me about the wider world is how it's filled to the brim with fictional locations, and how there isn't a Los Angeles or New York City in the DCU. Each location or landmark is going to have its own unique aesthetic and vibe to it that makes the world feel more lived in. A way to capture the distinctiveness of Wonder Woman's upbringing would be through highlighting the features of Themyscira's landscape, with its use of advanced technology and Greco-Roman aesthetic, filled with poets and scholars that have access to texts and scrolls that go back centuries. Some of their culture or roots can be shown through their attire, with characters like Cersei having been established to be an Amazon as opposed to what's depicted in her comic origin. She's the first Wonder Woman villain to be introduced in the DCU. One of the issues with the Wonder Woman comics is how new writers would sometimes disregard things that were established in previous runs so that they could start over with a new take to a degree that wouldn't be allowed for heavy hitters like Batman or Spider-Man. Any antagonists that are introduced should have recurring roles in this universe. Villains tied to a specific hero become recognizable or favored by an audience through consistent characterization in media and frequent roles that stand out. If you just have a bunch of one and done generic villains, you can't expect them them to be remembered by audiences. Lex Luthor made a lasting impression in Superman, having a role in the universe through his cameo in Peacemaker Season 2, and returning in Man of Tomorrow as more of an ally in the fight against Brainiac. We never got clarification on what happened to Cersei after episode 4 of Creature Commando Season 1, and she was never heard from again. It'd probably be safe to assume that she remained locked up in Belle Reve, but Cersei gotta get her lick back in future appearances, because she was kinda done dirty in terms of her powers and abilities. She's one of Wonder Woman's most prominent antagonists in the source material who is by no means a jobber, and Diana would ideally be significantly faster and stronger than the likes of Weasel, Dr. Phosphorus, or the Bride. There were some creative uses of her magic, superhuman durability, and strength during her fight against the Bride. Don't take too much issue with her motivations or characterization, but it's kind of bad optics to have one of Wonder Woman's heavy hitter villains get speed blitzed by a Z-lister like Weasel.
You see how this looks, right?
Cersei should make a return, hopefully with a power amp, because it would be a waste not to further utilize Anya Shalatra as the character in live action. Regardless of how well this new version of Wonder Woman turns out, one thing I'm willing to bet is that they're absolutely gonna nail the casting. Say what you want about the current trajectory of the DCU, but every major casting for the key players has been spot on thus far. From David Cornsweet and Nicholas Hoult as Superman and Lex Luthor, Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre's superb chemistry as Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. I thought Millie Alcock did a pretty good job as Supergirl. Even the casting choices for smaller profile characters have been on point. I highly doubt we're gonna get another Gal Gadot situation with Wonder Woman. I remember there was some concern regarding who would play the character a few years back, because at the time it seemed a bit up in the air if Gal Gadot would remain in the DCU, before it was confirmed that she would not be reprising her role. Could you imagine her version of Diana interacting with David Cornsweet's Superman? Superman, you should not have interfered with the Jahanpur conflict. You should have protected and aided the great nation of Baravia instead. Not only is it important to get this version right, since she would be a major pillar of the universe, it's the only outlet of content Wonder Woman has on the horizon. We're talking about an icon that hasn't had an animated movie since 2019. Her last theatrical movie was absolutely abysmal. There's no animated series in sight. The game that was being developed by Monolith was cancelled a year ago. It's a sad truth, but Wonder Woman 1984 was the last dedicated Wonder Woman project we've gotten across any medium outside comics. There hasn't been a single movie or TV show centered on her for almost 6 years. That's honestly worse than Batman not having any theatrical movies for 8 years after the release of Batman and Robin. He was still getting projects there in that time frame, with DCAU shows like the new Batman Adventures and Batman Beyond airing new episodes, as well as standalones like the Batman from 2004. There were multiple Batman video games released during that time window as well. If they somehow fumble the bag, they're gonna send Diana into a dungeon for the next 8 years, would be the textbook definition of studio head incompetence. It goes without saying that a lot is riding on the DCU Wonder Woman. This has to set the standard for how the character will be depicted across media going forward, and at the bare minimum, encourage DC Studios to greenlight other Wonder Woman adaptations for different outlets, such as animation, which they should have done from the get-go, but whatever. Hopefully Gunn doesn't have a here you go now stop complaining mentality when it comes to making a Wonder Woman movie. This can't be a one and done where the rest of her appearances are relegated to cameos or supporting roles in other films. You could probably get away with that for a character like Supergirl, but not with a member of the Trinity. This character's future and significance in modern pop culture needs to be secured, and she deserves to have stories about her told on the big screen that do justice to the source material, and convince audiences to see the heroine in a brand new light they may have never even considered.